Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you again. My wife's new blood pressure medication, remember, it has to be on time. David Peterson's voice was sweet and full of concern as he stepped into his wife's opulent bedroom in their Beverly Hills mansion. In his hand was an early morning tea, but his gaze wasn't on the smiling Catherine in bed, but fixed on the nimble hands of the young nurse, Sarah. Sarah nodded softly, not lifting her face from the medicine tray. Yes, sir, I always remember. Ni a.m., right after breakfast. Good, very good, David smiled, placing the teacup on the small bedside table. You see, Catherine? I told you, with Sarah here, we have absolutely nothing to worry about. Catherine reached for her husband's hand, her voice affectionate. I know you worry about me, but Sarah is even more careful than I am. David chuckled but then turned back to Sarah, his voice suddenly curious. This kind, it looks different from the old one, doesn't it? Did the doctor give you any special instructions, dear? His question was too specific, too focused on a tiny pill. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She looked up, met David's eyes, and calmly replied, No, nothing special, sir. The doctor said this new type will help keep her blood pressure stable for longer. Stable for longer, David repeated, nodding slightly, a strange gleam in his eyes that only Sarah caught. Well, that's excellent then. He kissed his wife's forehead and then turned and walked out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Catherine suspected nothing, but Sarah couldn't stop looking down at the pale blue pill on the tray. David's question echoed in her ears, not like a query, but like a confirmation. A confirmation of what? A chilling sense of unease began to creep into her mind. Sarah shook off the cold shiver that ran down her spine. Perhaps she was being overly sensitive. It was natural for a husband to worry about his wife's health, and asking about a new medication was not unusual. But that look, the way he repeated the phrase stable for longer, with thinly veiled satisfaction, still lingered in her thoughts. She quickly dismissed the wandering thoughts to focus on her work. For an orphan like Sarah, this position wasn't just a job, it was a miracle. Memories of her lonely years in the orphanage on the outskirts of Los Angeles, sleepless nights studying under the dim yellow light of the nursing school dormitory, all those tireless efforts culminated the moment Mrs. Catherine Evans gave her the nod. To be the private nurse for Catherine, a powerful figure she'd only seen in newspapers, was a dream she herself hadn't believed could come true. And Sarah hadn't disappointed her. She wasn't just a nurse who followed medical orders. She remembered Catherine preferred chamomile tea in the evenings to help her sleep, that she liked listening to soothing classical music in the afternoons, and even the story of a broken first love that Catherine had only confided in her. Sarah cared for her with both the dedication of a professional and the warmth of a loved one. It was this genuine sincerity that broke through the businesswoman's tough exterior. One afternoon, as Sarah was gently massaging Catherine's tired feet, the older woman spoke unexpectedly, her voice soft and warm. Sometimes I wonder, if you weren't here, how dull my life would be, Sarah. Sarah smiled. It's my honor to take care of you. No, Catherine shook her head, her eyes looking at Sarah with affection. You don't just take care of my health. You bring peace to this house. Before, I only had meetings, numbers, and silence. You've brought life back here. She paused, then took Sarah's hand. Later, when I'm stronger, do you have any plans? With your intelligence and dedication, you should become an excellent doctor. Those words deeply touched Sarah's heart. No one, besides her teachers at school, had ever placed so much faith in her future. Catherine didn't just see her as an employee. She saw potential, nurturing Sarah's future. After only a few months, the employer-employee dynamic had completely vanished. Catherine treated Sarah like the daughter she never had. She taught her how to appreciate art, told her stories of daring business ventures in her youth, and listened to her deepest confidences. For Sarah, who had never known parental love, Catherine had become family, her most steadfast refuge. And having found a family, Sarah knew that she would do anything to protect it. Yet, within this warm family, David Peterson remained an enigma. On the surface, he was always an exemplary husband, but Sarah sensed something was off. David's concern was peculiar. He didn't ask about general health, he only focused on the medication. "How long does this bottle of pills last, Sarah?" he would ask. "When does the doctor say she can stop taking the blood pressure medication?" He would inquire another time. Most suspiciously, David always insisted on picking up his wife's medication. He said it was his way of showing love, but each time he returned with the medicine, he wouldn't immediately give it to Sarah. Instead, he would retreat to his private study for a while. Once, Sarah brought him tea without knocking. She saw David sitting at his desk, pouring a few of Catherine's blood pressure pills into his hand, scrutinizing them under the lamp. Seeing Sarah, David started, quickly clenching his hand, but then he quickly smiled. "Oh, I was just checking to see if the pills were damp or moldy. It's been so humid lately." Sarah nodded and quietly retreated, but her mind was full of doubt. That explanation made no sense at all. Who checks medication in such a strange way? From that day on, Sarah knew she couldn't trust this man. Sarah's suspicions reached their peak one Saturday morning. It was her usual day to reorganize the family's small medicine cabinet. As she was wiping down each bottle, her hand paused at Catherine's familiar blood pressure medication. Something was wrong. The label on the bottle looked newer, and the edge of the sticker was slightly off from where she remembered it. A nurse's intuition told her something was amiss. Sarah carefully used her fingernail to gently pry at a corner of the label. The paper peeled away surprisingly easily, and underneath it, another label, the original manufacturer's label, was revealed. Sarah held her breath. The name of the drug on the original label was not a blood pressure medication. It was a potent cardiac stimulant used only in emergencies. If taken daily in small doses, it wouldn't save a life, but would slowly erode heart health, causing weakness until the heart finally stopped. All symptoms would appear to be a natural illness. She felt a cold dread wash over her. This wasn't a mistake. This was a carefully calculated murder plot. Just then, David's voice came from the balcony just outside the medicine room window. He was on the phone, whispering, but loud enough for Sarah to hear every word in the quiet air. "Don't worry. Everything is under control," David said. "Just do as I instructed. Once she weakens, I will inherit everything. Your share won't be a penny short." Each word was like a hammer blow to Sarah's mind. The bottle of poison in her hand and the phone confession clicked together into a terrifying truth. David was plotting to kill his wife for her fortune. Sarah's heart pounded like a drum. She heard David in the call. With a final surge of composure, she carefully reattached the fake label, placed the bottle back in its original spot, and then quietly slipped out of the room before he could enter. The moment the door closed, Sarah had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. She knew then that Catherine's life now lay in her hands. All that day, Sarah lived in fear. Every time David smiled at his wife, she felt goosebumps. Every time he solicitously inquired about Catherine's health, her chest tightened. She had to act, but how? If she told Catherine the truth without concrete evidence, who would she believe? A nurse who had only worked for a few months, or the husband she had shared her life with for so many years? David would easily deny everything and brand her a slanderer. The opportunity, or rather, the moment of truth, arrived that evening. As usual, after dinner, Sarah brought the medicine tray and a glass of warm water to Catherine. David was also there. He sat beside his wife, reading her a news article from the paper. Everything looked so peaceful, a chilling picture of a happy family. Catherine smiled at Sarah, reaching out to take the blood pressure pill, the death pill. "Thank you, dear." The moment Catherine was about to put the pill in her mouth, Sarah's heart seemed to stop. All hesitation vanished, replaced by a single thought. She had to stop her. "Wet, ma'am?" Sarah moved quickly, her hand gently but firmly placed on Catherine's, stopping her action. Catherine looked at her in surprise. "What's wrong, Sarah?" David also looked up, his eyes sharp as knives sweeping over Sarah. "What is it, dear?" "It's time for her medication." Sarah's throat was dry. Under David's scrutinizing gaze, she knew she had only one chance. She looked directly into Catherine's eyes, her gaze filled with urgency and sincerity. She couldn't explain, couldn't provide evidence right now. She could only stake everything on the trust Catherine had placed in her. Her voice trembled, but was resolute as she gently said, "Please, ma'am, please just trust me this once. Don't take it." David's gaze cut across Sarah, both angry and probing. "Sarah, what are you doing? Her health is not a joke." But Catherine raised her hand, signaling her husband to be silent. She looked deeply into Sarah's eyes, seeing not impulsiveness, but genuine fear. The instinct of a woman who had spent her life in the business world told her that this was no simple matter. "David, please step outside," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I want to talk to Sarah privately." David was stunned, but dared not disobey his wife's command. He angrily stomped out, slamming the door shut. Alone now, Sarah nervously recounted everything about the swap medication label, about the dangerous drug hidden beneath, and even the phone call she had overheard by chance. After listening, Catherine's face showed no panic, but became cold and sharp. The frailty of a patient vanished, replaced by the resolve of a powerful businesswoman. She didn't cry. She needed the truth. "First thing," she said decisively, "we need proof." The very next morning, taking advantage of David being out playing golf at the exclusive country club, Sarah carefully took a pill from the swapped bottle. Following Catherine's instructions, she took it to the most reliable private laboratory in New York City, a place Catherine was sure David could not influence. The results came back a few hours later, sent directly to Catherine's private email. There was only a brief line, but enough to stun anyone. Active ingredient digoxin. Incorrect dosage over an extended period will lead to heart failure and death. The first piece of evidence was in, but Catherine wanted more. She wanted to hear the truth from the traitor's own lips. That evening, she gave Sarah a very ordinary-looking fountain pen. "This is a recording device. Find a way to place it in his study, somewhere discreet." Sarah's palms were sweating. She waited until David went to the bathroom, then sneaked into his study. Her heart pounded in her chest. She quickly placed the pen inside an old pen holder on his desk, pointing the microphone towards the chair. They didn't have to wait long. That night, believing his wife had taken another dose of the poison and was weakening, David let his guard down. Catherine and Sarah sat in the bedroom, holding their breath as they listened to the sound transmitted from the device to Catherine's phone. They heard David dial a number, then a voice answered. "Hello? It's me," David whispered. "The last batch of special medicine is almost gone. Prepare another batch for me." The other end of the line seemed to hesitate. "Is this okay? What if we get caught? What's there to be afraid of?" David's voice turned malicious. "Just keep supplying it. She's weakening exactly as planned. When I get everything, you won't have to worry about money anymore." The call ended. In the bedroom, Catherine closed her eyes. A final tear rolled down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from the confirmed betrayal. She opened her eyes, looking at Sarah. Her gaze was now ice cold. "We have enough," she said. In the heavy silence of the room, there was only the ragged breathing of the two women. Catherine held the phone in her hand, but her fingers trembled so much she couldn't dial. She had faced countless adversaries in the business world, but she had never felt so vulnerable. Sarah gently placed her hand on Catherine's, offering her a little warmth and strength. "I'm here with you." Reassured, Catherine took a deep breath. Her hand stopped trembling. She decisively dialed the number, her voice clear and firm, with no trace of hesitation. "Hello, this is Catherine Evans. I want to report a case. A poisoning plot. Yes, right here at my home in Beverly Hills. My witness, Sarah, is right beside me." As soon as the call ended, they heard David's car pulling into the driveway. He was home. "Sarah, go into the other room," Catherine said quickly. "Let me face him alone." But Sarah shook her head, her eyes determined. "No, ma'am. I won't leave you alone." The bedroom door burst open. David walked in with a smile on his face, a glass of orange juice in his hand. "My love, drink some water to feel better. You look a little." His smile vanished when he saw Sarah standing there, not in the position of a nurse, but standing protectively in front of Catherine. "Sarah?" David frowned. "What are you doing here? Get out of the way so I can talk to her." "It's over, sir," Sarah replied, her voice not loud but incredibly steady, meeting his angry gaze head on. "What did you say?" David roared, throwing the glass of water to the floor. "Who are you to talk to me like that? Get out!" He raised his hand to push Sarah aside, but just then, the room door burst open again. "Everyone stay still. Police." Two plainclothes officers rushed in, followed by a uniformed team. The room plunged into chaos. David froze, his face ashen. An officer stepped forward, holding a warrant for his arrest. "David Peterson, you are under arrest on suspicion of plotting to poison Mrs. Catherine Evans." While David was still in shock, another officer found the poison bottle on the table and the recording still playing on Catherine's phone. The evidence was undeniable. Cornered, David suddenly became frantic. He pointed at Sarah, yelling, "It's her! It's all that girl's fabrication! She wants to harm me! She wants to take over this fortune!" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Catherine, who still sat on the bed with a frighteningly calm expression. She looked directly at the man she once called her husband, her voice cold, devoid of any emotion. "We have the truth in our hands." On the day of the trial at the Los Angeles Superior Court, Sarah did not arrive as a silent nurse in a white uniform. She sat in the front row, right next to Catherine. Catherine had personally chosen a formal outfit for her, not to show off, but to affirm one thing. Sarah was not just a witness, she was part of the truth, a member of her family. In the courtroom, David Peterson looked haggard and pathetic, completely stripped of his former elegance. He repeatedly glanced at Catherine, trying to find a glimmer of hope, but only met with cold silence. The trial did not last as long as anticipated. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence. First was the lab result of the medication bottle, clearly indicating the presence of digoxin. Next, the recorded audio was played for the entire courtroom to hear. David's malicious and calculating voice discussing the special batch of medicine and his plans to inherit everything echoed, making all of David's previous denials look ludicrous. When called to testify, Sarah calmly and clearly recounted everything, from her initial suspicions to the moment she discovered the swapped medication label. She added no embellishments, simply presenting the facts. Her gaze never once wavered towards David. She looked directly at the judge. Finally, David's lawyer made a last-ditch effort, claiming Sarah had fabricated the story to gain Catherine's trust and fortune. But when the judge asked Catherine if she believed Sarah's testimony, she replied with a short, powerful sentence, "I trust her with my life." Those words put an end to all of David's efforts. The verdict was announced. With concrete evidence of a deliberate and sophisticated murder plot, David Peterson was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. As the police led David away, he turned to look at Catherine and Sarah one last time, his eyes filled with hatred. But the two women did not flinch. They rose together, leaving the courtroom, leaving the dark past behind to step towards the light. After the trial concluded, public opinion and the media continued to buzz. But Catherine and Sarah left all the commotion behind. A few weeks later, Catherine hosted a small, intimate party at her mansion, inviting only her closest friends and most trusted associates. No one knew the reason for the party. They simply thought it was an occasion for Catherine to celebrate surviving the ordeal. When everyone was gathered, Catherine, in an elegant dress and completely recovered demeanor, stood up to speak. She thanked everyone for being by her side. Then her gaze turned to Sarah, who stood quietly in a corner of the room. During the darkest days, Catherine's voice was warm and emotional. There was one person who not only saved my life, but also restored my faith in the goodness of humanity. She walked over, took Sarah's hand, and led her to stand beside her, to everyone's astonishment. "Many of you know Sarah as my nurse," she continued, her voice resonating with pride. "But today, I want to formally announce to everyone, from this moment on, Sarah will no longer be my nurse." She paused for a moment, then smiled radiantly. "Sarah will be my daughter, Catherine Sarah Evans." The room erupted in applause. Sarah was stunned, tears of happiness streaming down her face. She had never dared to dream of a day when she would have a name, a complete family. Catherine hugged her tightly, comforting the trembling back of her new daughter. But the gift Catherine gave Sarah didn't stop there. A few days later, when it was just the two of them, Catherine handed her a folder. "I remember you once said you dreamed of becoming a doctor," Catherine said. "My daughter's dream cannot be left unfulfilled. This is your admission file to the most prestigious medical school, Harvard. I've taken care of everything. You just need to focus on your studies. I'll handle the rest." Sarah held the folder in her hand, feeling overwhelmed by the love and trust. Her life, from an orphan nurse with no one to rely on, had officially turned a completely new page. The path to becoming a true doctor, someone who could save even more lives, lay wide open before her. Years passed, and Sarah immersed herself in her studies with all her passion and gratitude. With her innate intelligence and the solid backing of her powerful adoptive mother, she not only graduated with honors but also became one of the most outstanding medical students in her class. The dream she once held had now come true. Sarah donned her white lab coat, officially becoming a doctor at New York's largest hospital, owned by the Evans pharmaceutical conglomerate. She was no longer the shy nurse she once was. Now, Dr. Catherine Sarah Evans was a confident, capable woman with eyes that always shone with empathy and wisdom. She was beloved by her patients for her dedication and respected by her colleagues for her solid expertise. It was here, in the hospital's research lab, that she met her destiny. It was Daniel, a young, brilliant pharmaceutical researcher with bright, enthusiastic eyes. He was leading a project to develop new medication for heart disease, a strangely coincidental alignment. They first met at a conference on new treatment methods. Sarah was drawn to Daniel's passionate presentation, and he was deeply impressed by the sharp questions she posed. They began to talk, initially about work, about chemical formulas, about clinical trials, but then those conversations gradually extended beyond working hours. They realized they shared a common ideal: to use their knowledge to save lives, to bring hope to patients. They shared everything with each other, from the joy of a successful project to the sadness of witnessing a life that couldn't be saved. Love came to them naturally and gently, like breathing. Daniel loved Sarah's strength and compassion, and Sarah found in Daniel a kindred spirit and a strong shoulder to lean on. One sunset afternoon, after successfully saving a critically ill patient together, Daniel took Sarah's hand in the deserted hospital hallway. "Sarah," he said, his voice sincere, "I don't just want to save lives with you in this hospital. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Their wedding was intimate, yet elegant, held in a rooftop garden in Manhattan. Catherine stood at the altar, giving her beloved daughter away to the son-in-law she trusted wholeheartedly. Seeing Sarah and Daniel's radiant smiles of happiness, she knew that her daughter had finally found a peaceful and complete haven. Many years later, when life had settled into a calm and happy routine, Catherine did something no one expected. Alone, she drove to the federal prison where David was serving his sentence. The meeting took place in a small, cold room, separated by a thick glass partition. David had changed completely. His hair was much grayer, his former elegant demeanor replaced by the weariness and hardship of years in prison. Seeing Catherine, he was stunned, his eyes gleaming with a faint flicker of hope. They picked up the phone receivers. "Catherine, you really came?" David's voice trembled. Catherine looked directly at the man who was once her husband, her face calm, without a trace of resentment. "I came to talk one last time, David." I'm sorry," David mumbled. "Every day here, I regret it. I know I committed an unforgivable sin." Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she gently said, "I came here today to tell you that I forgive you." David's eyes lit up. "You forgive me? Really, Catherine, so when I get out of prison?" "No," Catherine cut him off, her voice still gentle but firm. "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I forgive to free my heart from hatred. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting." She looked deep into his eyes, speaking each word clearly. "Your betrayal that day ended all ties between us. Forever." With that, she put down the receiver, not waiting for a reply. Catherine stood up, turned her back, and walked away, never looking back. She left David alone, sitting stunned behind the glass, with the bitter truth that he had lost everything, including the last chance to reclaim the past. As she walked out of the prison gates, Catherine took a deep breath. The sky outside was clear and blue, and she felt a lightness in her heart. That old chapter of her life had truly closed. A year later, joy once again knocked on the Evans family's door. The hospital where Sarah and Daniel worked buzzed with congratulations as they welcomed a beautiful baby girl with dark eyes just like Sarah's. They named the little girl Grace, a name that was not just a wish for her future, but also a mark of all the love that had brought them together. On the day Catherine visited her granddaughter, she didn't come as a CEO, but as a grandmother, her arms full of gifts and her eyes sparkling with joy. The moment Sarah placed a tiny life into her arms, Catherine felt an unusual warmth spread through her body, filling every empty space in her heart over all those years. She looked at her sleeping granddaughter's face, a face that bore no trace of deceit or calculation, only absolute innocence and peace. She had once had everything: money, power, status. But all of it combined couldn't compare to this feeling. David's betrayal had once made her think she would never be able to trust something called family again. But Sarah had come, and now there was Grace. Holding Grace in her arms, with Sarah and Daniel beside her looking at her with affectionate eyes, Catherine smiled, a contented and serene smile. Finally, after everything, she had found her true family.